Welcome to the pre-conference webinar for the 5th IConGCED. I'm Seonmi from the Office of Research and Development at APCEIU. On behalf of APCEIU, I would like to extend our gratitude to everyone who's here today. Since 2016, IConGCED has annually brought various actors of GCED together as an international platform for exchanging ideas and practices on GCED. This year, in response to the COVID-19 outbreak, the 5th IConGCED will be organized online to encourage audience around the world participate virtually. Prior to the 5th IConGCED to be held from 3rd to 5th of November, this pre-conference webinar aims to lay the ground for further and more substantial discussions to be made at the main conference. Today, under the theme of challenges and roles of GCED in times of pandemic, this pre-conference webinar invited distinguished speakers to enrich our discourse and provide more concrete insight. Before we go further, I'd like to briefly inform you of webinar housekeeping rules. This webinar will run for about 2 hours. During the webinar, all participant lines will be muted. At the end of the panel discussion, there will be a Q&A session. You can submit your questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom. Your questions and comments are welcome. This webinar is live streamed at APCEIU's YouTube channel. It is being recorded, and the recording will be available at APCEIU's YouTube channel as well. Attendance certificate will be provided through your email within a week if you registered and participated in the webinar via Zoom. If you are participating via YouTube live streaming, unfortunately, certificates will not be provided. Now, I would like to begin the pre-conference webinar for the 5th IConGCED. First, let me invite the Director of APCEIU, Mr. Im Hyun-mook, for his opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this pre-conference webinar on challenges and roles of global citizenship education in times of pandemic. I thank you all for joining us online from different time zones of the world. Last Monday, Oxfam released a new research report showing that the richest 1% of the world population were responsible for CO2 emissions, more than twice as much as the poorest 50% for the last 25 years. Only the richest 1% people of the world caused more than double CO2 emissions of the poorest 50% from 1990 to 2015. According to the report, transportation is one of the key factors for this unfair and unjust reality. People in rich countries over the last 2 decades have tended to drive more and more big SUVs and take airplanes too frequently. So I am happy to meet you all through online today without causing heavy CO2 emissions, which is an urgently needed action for all global citizens of the world. I appreciate your responsible action to reduce CO2 emissions and tackle climate crisis. Of course, our individual actions alone cannot solve climate crisis. There must be a systemic change in the structure of production and consumption, especially energy. For this, our collective action is essential, and our collective action is best enabled by education and learning at all levels and in all settings. So today, we have a very important task to undertake. We need to clearly identify challenges of education and learning, especially for global citizenship in today's context of global crisis, and redefine priority actions to respond to such challenges. We are confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic. This global health crisis is widening the existing economic inequality, which is in turn leading to a surge in hatred and discrimination. But as we see in wildfires in Australia and California, and the invasion of locusts in East Africa, climate crisis is also posing a question of life and death. What education and learning can and should do in the face of such life and death question? Our task is not easy. During the pandemic, educational inequality is widening. For the great majority of people in the world, continuing education itself is a top priority. Without special action, this educational inequality will combine with economic inequality and make things even worse. So far, we have talked quite a lot about the necessity and desirability of global citizenship education in today's globalizing world. We have produced a pretty good number of roadmaps and action plans to put GCED into practice in all parts of the world. But given the urgency and seriousness of today's global crisis, we need to sharpen our focus on GCED. We need to reinforce our efforts to translate our commitment to GCED into concrete action and practice. We need to review our priorities and facilitate more cooperative joint action. So I expect that this pre-conference will serve as a good starting point for our in-depth discussions at our upcoming annual GCED conference in November. On this note, I thank our wonderful keynote speaker, Professor Ilan Kelman at University College London, and the excellent team of panelists from different parts of the world. It is our hope that today we will identify more clearly critical issues that should be dealt with in our November conference. Thank you for your valuable contribution, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Lim, for your inspiring opening remarks. Next, it is my great pleasure to invite Mr. Ilan Kelman, Professor of Disasters and Health at University College of London. His overall research interest is linking disasters and health, including the integration of climate change into disaster and health research. He will be giving his keynote speech entitled Choosing Our Post-Pandemic World. Professor Kelman, please take the mic.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. It is so wonderful to see several hundred people online from around the world, all of your wonderful countries, and of course, especially to our wonderful organizers for creating this and for the opportunity to be here. I am available on social media, so I'm going to provide my contact details. You will see them at the end, and please engage in the discussion because we need you. We need your ideas. We need your help. We need your approaches in order to move forward and join us in this difficult situation, because we are well aware of the problems we are having. And thank you everyone here for being part of the solutions, especially being part of choosing solutions, because we are fortunate that we are the ones who tend to have some choices. We can therefore choose the principles which matter to us. We can choose to pursue these principles, and clear examples are citizenship and solidarity. Our duty is making them important, leading others to understanding and accepting them, and doing so with education, so maybe for children in school as per the photograph, but also for others who are not in school, who are being educated in different ways. because learning and teaching are for life. Then together, we can all choose collectively to prevent further pandemics and other crises while continuing to do better to help all people under all circumstances. But how do we do this? How do we lead and educate on solidarity and citizenship to prevent what caused the problems we face now, as well as other crises, while also continuing to do better to help people? How do we actually do this? How do we lead and educate on solidarity and citizenship to prevent these issues? Well, education includes definitions. And more importantly, though, education is about skills to interpret and apply definitions. So what is citizenship? Well, here it is not about having the passport of a country. It means accepting rights and duties to be a constructively contributing member of society as much as possible. Leadership in asking for help when needed and in helping others when they ask for assistance. Living oneself while fulfilling obligations to others and to society. Retaining opportunities to have fun without neglecting the hard, dedicated work required to keep society functioning with or without a pandemic. Meanwhile, solidarity is not about a specific ideology. It is not about opposing a specific ideology. It is about one phrase of the pandemic, that we are all in this together, or at least we should all be in this together. We find out that, as with most disasters, this pandemic means that the majority of people lose something while a few gain, as per the introductory comments which we heard to start off this conference. Those who start with the least tend to end up worst in disasters. Instead, we can learn and teach so that we are all human beings together, aiming to stop others, including ourselves, from suffering. We can join to work with and for each other against the ravages of lethal viruses and many other challenges. But who has choices? Who has power? Who has resources? Well, not all of us have the options to consider citizenship and solidarity. There is absolutely a need for some of us to become leaders for generating opportunities for everyone, and to teach everyone how to generate these opportunities for themselves and for those around us. Many of you are educators and leaders. Thank you. So that means that we can choose to change what we do in small ways. Even the typical vocabulary of this pandemic shows the changes we need. So a popular phrase has become social distancing, but that's actually not very good. I mean, the reality is that we need physical distancing, that we should not be close to each other to stop the virus from spreading, while remaining as socially close as we can in these sort of online formats. And again, this is wonderful to see. We're almost up to 500 people joining us. This is not social distancing, but this is physical distancing. And as was mentioned earlier, it's about reducing our impact on the environment to do better while still learning, teaching, and exchanging. Similarly, we hear so many people talking about exit strategies from the pandemic and from the lockdown. But what about instead an entrance strategy, an entrance to a better civilization and a better humanity as our choice of a post-pandemic world? I mean, what about the new normal? Do we ever have stability or normality? Or do we just crave it? Perhaps choosing a post-pandemic world where the normal is accepting positive change, maybe that's what we need. And where the normal is continually striving to change the normality of problems, to create a normality of improving ourselves and others. Through such education and change, we can and should create solidarity and citizenship in terms of thinking how to do better, how to prevent problems, how to implement solutions, and how to encourage people to learn for themselves and to think for themselves. Then hopefully people will generally vote where they can vote. People will generally vote in a more informed manner and even think about becoming a politician, to stand as a candidate, to be that leader, to be part of elected office serving the people. Then we can look at leaders who have done well, look at leaders who have done poorly, and try and ensure that we do well, that we do not do poorly. We can think about leaders beyond those who we elect, leaders beyond those who are in the news every day. These leaders might be children in schools. They might be other learners who lead us in how to teach what they need. Consider also health professionals, utility workers, transportation staff, cleaners, trash collectors, those in the food industry, and many others who every day continued working on site to keep vital systems functioning for us, those of us who are working from home who did not go out every day. Far too many of these leaders died because of COVID-19, simply because of poor prevention, lack of prevention, followed by inadequate responses to protect them until it was too late. They are the leaders we seek who did not deserve to die, who did not want to die serving us. They showed the solidarity and citizenship characteristics we hope we will all choose for our post-pandemic world, but preferably a post-pandemic world where they do not die, in disasters, but instead are supported long before there is a crisis to help prevent the crisis. Because prevention is better than cure. We had so many opportunities to stop the pandemic situation before it was even beginning. Rather than educating and leading to stop problems before they become large, we were forced into a choice of mass death from COVID-19 or mass death from lockdown, because severe lockdown measures ruin people's livelihoods. It stopped many from seeking medical attention for other day-to-day issues. It led to increased domestic violence, increased mental health issues, increased self-harm. If we have a choice between disease and lockdown, that is not a choice. That is not prevention. That is not leadership. That is not solidarity. That is not citizenship. And we need to educate for it. Prevention means leadership to resolve the longer term conditions which created the disaster. For example, our health systems. Many countries do not have adequate health systems to deal with simply day-to-day health needs, day-to-day health issues. So of course these health systems are going to fail during a crisis, as we have seen in so many countries during this pandemic. Some countries do not even provide fully accessible healthcare to all their citizens. People must pay for diagnosis and treatment. This is a chronic crisis of inadequate healthcare for everyone. This is a pandemic of societies not serving their people. This inevitably invites acute crises such as outbreaks. Similarly, the world spends more than 10 times on government departments of defense and weapons than we spend on international aid. Notwithstanding all the problems of the international aid system, at least it tries to help people. Meanwhile, governments are using our tax money to subsidize the fossil fuel industry at perhaps 2 orders of magnitude more than governments invest in all forms of prevention, including for pandemics. As we heard, a minority are causing the majority of pollution, which causes problems for us all. We know that education budgets are often tiny compared to military budgets. We know that it is impossible to educate others without learning something ourselves. All learners and all students teach the teacher simply by becoming a learner. This is solidarity between teacher and student to try to do better for those who do not have the options to be a teacher or a student. This is citizenship, being a citizen for ourselves and for everyone, which includes homeless people, prisoners, those in our countries without formal documents, people who have suffered because others made them suffer. We are the leaders to involve everyone, and then with everyone involved, we can support prevention over the long term. This then is what I would suggest we need for education. This should be our aim in leadership and education. Teaching people how to think ahead of disaster, leading the implementation of well-known, long-standing lessons we have on prevention in order to help people over the long term. This means working together in global solidarity, working together in global citizenship education to stop a crisis from happening so that we never have to implement the emergency measures which are so costly. Because again, a choice between costly measures and the cost of not taking measures is not the choice we want. So again, please discuss with me. Please add ideas. You have my contact details. You can find me on social media, send me an email, because I need to learn too. And by teaching, learning, and exchanging together, we will overcome what we are experiencing. We will join forces with the organizers here and the wonderful distinguished panel coming up in order to do so much better for everyone. Thank you for being part of it, and thank you for choosing a much better post-pandemic world.
Thank you, Professor Kalman, for your insightful speech. It was such a provoking keynote, encouraging us to actively respond to the post-pandemic world through citizenship and solidarity. Follow session is panel discussion. Now, let me introduce the moderator of the panel discussion, Ms. Jung-min, head of the Office of Research and Development at APCEIU.
Thanks, Sammi. I'm Jung-min from APCEIU, the moderator of today's panel discussion. As illuminated by, at the opening remarks and keynote speech, we are all facing a global crisis. This pandemic has not only threatened our lives and livelihood, but it has also unearthed and magnified injustice of various forms: discrimination, inequality, economic polarization, undemocratic governance, to name a few. So we are going through a harsh time of increased antagonism, phobia, and distrust, not to mention other difficulties such as physical distancing and social isolation, economic downfall, and further polarization, all of which will hit the vulnerable and the marginalized most severely. Yet, at the same time, and paradoxically, the current crisis makes it ever more evident that we live in a historic time when equity and justice, democracy, commons for human security, caring and respect for others, compassion and solidarity are ever more needed. Global citizenship education is, I would define, education for peace, justice, and sustainability with a sense of common humanity and a sense of community beyond one's immediate boundaries. Therefore, under the current crisis, and probably for the post-pandemic era, we may see both challenges and opportunities for GCED. Hence, it is an important moment for global citizenship education to critically reflect on areas for improvement. So today, I've invited 6 panelists with diverse socio-geographical backgrounds and field of expertise to hear their diverse and common concerns and issues which GCED has to address and dedicated efforts to. Let me introduce our panelists today. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Okay, let me introduce first Lorena Gamara. Hi. She's academic consultant for Peruvian University of Applied Sciences. With her focus on education and youth leadership, Ms. Gamara co-founded organizations for youth and facilitated a number of workshops on GCED for high school students, university students, educators, and other youth organizations. Between 2016 and 2018, she was part of the core team of GCED Youth Network of APCEIU. We have Lily Lapalainen, who is founder and chair of Bridge 47, a global network to bring people together to share and learn through global citizenship education. He also serves as the Director of Sustainable Development in FINGO, Finnish Development NGO. Mr. Lapalainen has been actively creating and operating a number of global networks and projects, while also involved in UN-level policy processes. And we do have APCEIU, who is the founder of ANPET's Center for Environment and Development. As a high-profile expert in transformational change in Africa, environmental law, and climate change education, Ms. Ogbi currently serves as a board member of Earth Charter International, as well as associate of Kiko Educational London. She has also been involved in a number of UNESCO's ESD programs and activities. And we do have Lester Edwin J. Ruiz. Hi. He is a Director of Accreditation and Global Engagement of Association of Theological Schools in the United States and Canada. Having served as professor in the US and Japan, he was also Director of Transnational Academic Program for the World Order Models Project, which was the recipient of the 1990 UNESCO Prize for Peace Education. Mr. Ruiz's expertise include studies on peace, post-colonialism, diaspora, and international relations. He also serves as consultant for a global network of institutions working for migrants. We also have Bert J. Tuga, who is the president of Philippine Normal University and also serves as executive director of UN Association of the Philippines. Mr. Tuga is an alumnus of APCEIU's Capacity Building Program in 2010. And since then, he made invaluable contribution to the promotion of GCED, including his leadership in the APCEIU's current project on GCED curriculum development in the Philippines. Last but not least, we do have Dylan Ray, co-founder and director of Shikaya. Shikaya is a South Africa-based NGO supporting teachers and school leaders to ensure young people leave their schools thinking critically and acting as compassionate, engaged, democratic citizens. Serving as one of the main facilitators of APCEIU's training workshops since 2017, Mr. Ray has trained over 10,000 teachers and reached over 1 million young people through Shikaya in partnership with Facing History and Ourselves. So we welcome you all today and thanks for being with us. Hello, everyone. Okay, so for today's panel discussion, we will have 2 rounds of talks by the panelists, and then followed by the question and answer session with a couple of questions from the audience, and which will be then followed by the final round of comments from the panelists. So without further ado, let me just move to the first question to the panelists. So my question, Based on your critical evaluation of the particular time and current situation, and from your own professional, organizational, and personal vantage points and convictions, what are key issues and challenges that you think GCED should address in this time of crisis and beyond? To save time, I will simply call on your name one after another without further comments. So, Bert, would you please start first?
Thank you, Jongmin. Good day to my fellow speakers and to all online participants. To answer the question, the education sector probably is one of the hardest hit areas of the pandemic in the Philippines. The pandemic has grossly affected the continuity of teaching and learning. Thanks to the advancement of technology, we were able to find alternative ways to deliver education beyond the traditional face-to-face instruction. In basic education and teacher education, for instance, online education through the use of gadgets and internet connectivity is one of the modalities available for teachers and students. I think this is one of the safest, sustainable, and efficient modalities given the threats of the pandemic and the increasing demand for continuity of learning. In my own observation, however, there are issues that need to be addressed at the institutional and national levels to prevent the widening of the gap between the rich and the poor in terms of access to and continuity of education. Online education tends to favor those who haves and put those who have nots at the extreme level of disadvantage. Not to mention that many of the latter's homes are not conducive for learning. Teachers too experience the impact of digital divide in terms of access and competencies. In this case, global citizenship education can focus on strengthening national and global solidarity and partnership to help the poor and disadvantaged schools and learners cope with, with the impending inequality in the access to and delivery of education due to online or distance learning. We have seen best practices of local government and school engagement to address this issue. But this is only possible or easily done in well-off cities and municipalities. Serious problems are real in schools and communities located in rural setting or far-flung areas. The national government, as a matter of support, can provide financial assistance to low-income local government units for the technology needs of their schools and learners. The concept of global solidarity and partnership for education can also be adopted or institutionalized in business sector as part of their corporate social responsibility, especially the tech companies. Still relevant to the use of digital technology, now that more and more young people are engaged in the online environment, the problems and issues related to the misuse or inappropriate use of the internet have emerged drastically, such as online discrimination, invasion to privacy, cyberbullying, misinformation, fraud and copyright infringement, and other internet-related crimes. This is a very huge challenge in education since the online environment, unlike the physical schools or classrooms, can be managed efficiently and effectively by teachers with rules or guides that can be properly implemented and monitored. To address this, GCED can increase its focus on digital citizenship or responsible citizenship in multiple media, especially that many people, including the youth, have already or urgently migrated to the online environment during this pandemic. Digital citizenship as component of GCED can help promote appropriate and responsible behavior when using technology. Teachers can also be taught in terms of digital literacy and digital ethics so that they can properly guide their students. Soon, we expect the pandemic to reach the flattening of the curve, hopefully. I guess there's a common understanding that going back to the concept of normal prior to the COVID-19 outbreak is no longer the best possible way to take. In education, I guess we have to think and reevaluate the importance of distance learning or flexible learning to prevent future disruptions in education. Moving forward, however, we have to ensure that appropriate policies are laid out and implemented to still uphold inclusivity and social justice amid the full integration of technology in education. In addition, appropriate support from the national government and different stakeholders must be provided to ensure that quality education is provided to all. To borrow the words of Chairperson De Vera of the Commission on Higher Education of the Philippines, no student should be left behind in terms of accessibility to the internet. Thank you.
Thank you. Technical problem, sorry. Thank you, Bert. Next, APCEIU, could you please go ahead?
Yes, first of all, I would like to just say thank you to the Asia Pacific Center for Education for International Understanding under the auspices of UNESCO. And I must confess that I've benefited greatly from the speeches of the director, as well as the keynote address from our professor and my dear panelists. Yes, I am in agreement with all of them that the COVID-19 debacle has actually shaken everybody, that's shaken the world. And we saw, as they have mentioned, that as the world battled with this pandemic, you know, the pandemic affected a lot of lives, economy, education, politics, government. We witnessed both the strength and the weaknesses of the world culture we have built. And that is why global citizenship education is really, really something we should be discussing now. In education in particular, we witness the ease with which the children of the rich were able to continue their education as if nothing has happened, you know, and the poor left out of schooling. We also witness the dexterity with which countries with better investment in education were able to transition to virtual and safe physical distancing education, whilst many countries with mismanaged resources could care little whether children of the poor return to school or not. This is the reality. And the new report from UNICEF, Save the Children, raised the alarm that the world is facing a hidden education emergency and almost 10 million children may never return to school following the lockdown. And that 150 million additional children plunged into poverty due to COVID-19. I mean, these responses are all products of our governance structures and priorities. So we need to be looking at these, our priorities. There have been many educational frameworks since 1972 and earlier to realize a sustainable and peaceful world for all. The global citizenship education itself seeks to promote this common understanding that brings a sense of belonging to a broader community beyond national boundaries, as the keynote addressee has said. To achieve this, the GCED needs to integrate more concretely issues of trust, core values of respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace, as espoused in the Earth Charter document and in many other United Nations documents. A global education framework that is built on integrity towards respecting our diversity, tolerance, and freedom. The COVID-19 debacle has given the world an opportunity for a reset, you know, to begin to think about things in a new way, like our speaker said, keynote addressing, an entrance strategy. We do not have the future we want yet, but it is within everyone's reach because it comes with the choices we make every day. What we choose to focus on in our educational institutions, what we choose to focus on as we work together. Do we want to work in collaboration or in fragmented pieces? In our educational policies, in international organizations, in national policies? Do we want to continue to work in our silos? It comes also with governments we choose to govern us. We can choose to give the powerful more power and the despots more leeway. Our choices impact on the education systems and on our children. and on the global civilization that we hold sway. And we can also choose to live and let live, to build a world where respect, responsibility, humility, justice, tolerance, love, peace will be the oil that drives education, technology, economy, governance, community, the environment into year 2030 and beyond. If we are bold to make this right choice, we can march forward confidently. We need to be honest about the pillars upon which the global citizenship education stand. Having the right words may just not be enough, as the COVID-19 situation has revealed. There is the need for a game plan that will engage the commitment of governments. Governments have to back these words up, and social economic actors in business and in every other sector have to back these words up in this future that leaves no one behind. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Wow, that was very powerful. Thank you, Betsy. May I now call on Lester, please?
Thank you, Jungmin. In the US, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to dominate the public square. And as it does, it has made prominent the historic infirmities of the US system, not just in the areas of economy, environment, governance, health, and culture, but also in politics, public discourse, technology, and in what Robert Bellah calls habits of the heart. This emergency situation, rightly called the old normal, has unevenly plagued our world for at least the past 500 years. Many peoples of our planet continue to be dispersed, displaced, and dislocated, their identities profoundly racialized and ethnicized, as well as gendered and sexualized, their lives callously commodified and pathologized, their contexts militarized and securitized, and their bodies and memories incarcerated, rendered invisible, erased, or forgotten. So severe are these historically interrelated infirmities that we can say that we have been living in a world of multiple pandemics. But those of us who are engaged in education for global citizenship in the service of peace, justice, and sustainability must continuously be attentive to the old normal rather than focus on the so-called new normal. We need to keep asking, in what ways are these multiple pandemics interrelated? And if they are, how can our normative and aspirational responses to them be more fully and effectively articulated? What forms of intersectional analyses are required? What learning, teaching, and research pedagogies and strategies are needed? What political engagements and interventions are demanded? What dispositional, behavioral, and institutional changes are necessary? Or to put it in the insightful language of UNESCO, what should the next normal look like? These multiple pandemics are challenging our fundamental assumptions and practices of human community and identity, calling us to revisit the best in who we are as a species, particularly in terms of citizenship, diversity, global solidarity and community, of hospitality, social responsibility and friendship, of trust, joy, and love, and of resistance and struggle. To begin to address these challenges, allow me to identify without commentary several areas of possible conversation. First, the importance of deliberation or dialogue that is truthful, especially in the current cultures of untruth that have normalized lying, hypocrisy, and predatory self-interest in public, state-centric discourse and action. Second, the necessity of creating, nurturing, and defending the res publica, the common, which acknowledges profound contextual differences based on racial, ethnic, gender, class, sexual orientation, or disciplinary identities or solidarities, and affirms mutual obligations and relationships while simultaneously accepting norms of tolerance, decency, hospitality, and principled inclusion. Third, the need to redefine educational institutions as a local, regional, and global ecological system that are a convergence of food, water, livelihood, energy, information, technology, materials, friends, ideas, ideologies, recreation, sacred inspiration, not to mention economic, political, cultural interests and commitments. In short, education as biosphere. And fourth, the desirability of multilateral, multi-layered, and multi-perspectival partnerships and voices that seriously attend to the intersectionalities of the issues related to global education and citizenship, intentionally deepen and broaden sensitivities to the nuances and specificities of asymmetrical space, time, and place, recognizes the interdependence and relative autonomy in global North-South relations, and flatten power differentials arising out of the unevenness of human, financial, and physical resources, and of history and location. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester, for your insightful speech. Now, Dylan, can you please take the microphone?
Thank you, and wonderful to be here sharing this platform with some fantastic global leaders. I guess I want to focus on three aspects of this crisis and this time we're in. And firstly, in terms of COVID-19, I think both Bert and APCEIU both spoke about the challenges and the divides that COVID has revealed and deepened the poverty crisis in education. And I guess I would just add that COVID really has shown why internet access for all needs to be now a universal human right. And we, as APCEIU said, really need to be pushing for that. But COVID has also said to us going forward that GCED's focus really needs to be more emphatically and with more determination on social justice. If we can actively use the GCED framework and reach to ensure that all children leave schools, understanding that the role that each of us play in ensuring social justice for all, justice for others, what we do then is we increase that hope that future electorates, future citizens can and will use their voice and their vote to ensure that our leaders prioritize narrowing this poverty gap that COVID-19 has really brought to light. And we also increase the hope that regardless of leadership support in some places around the world, that young people can grow into adults who will each choose to support others and stand up and speak out for justice for all and justice for others. But this hasn't just been a time of COVID-19, it's been a time of Black Lives Matter. And it's another issue that has emerged globally and which GCED needs to respond to. And as Lester has just said, this is not a new crisis. This is not one of these new crises. Black Lives Matter is also not just a US movement. The sentiment has spread across the globe, has become intersectional, moving within and beyond race to issues of gender, class, and sexuality. And GCED for sure needs to respond to this movement now, but I think we also need to do more than intentionally focus on preparing a future where marginalized experiences matter. There's a call here for GCED to go even further. We need to be more proactively anti in response. It's no longer enough to be non-racial. Black Lives Matter calls for us to take a firm anti-racist behaviors. Promoting peace may not be enough anymore. We need to take stands against racism, sexism, homophobia. We need to move from inclusion and diversity to anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-homophobia. Basically, we need a louder voice, and what we are saying needs to be directional, and it needs to become intentional. Finally, another crisis that we're facing, and again, as Lester said, these are not new, but it is this fragility of democracy. It's this weakening in the belief of and faith in democratic institutions. And I would argue there's an ongoing global assault on democracy. And it was emerging before COVID, but it's intensified now, I would argue, as we as citizens have willingly handed over power and decision-making to leaders to keep us safe and control a pandemic. And so the question now is, how do we as citizens wrestle back our power? And we need to more actively promote civic participation and civic voice. GCED really needs to, as Ilan said, actively really promote the importance of choices that we have as citizens, especially as young people, and their role in governments. And I don't think we can sugarcoat this. If GCED does not take on strengthening the practice and the belief in democracy, we may find ourselves in a world where we've narrowed our choices and our rights don't matter. And it's much harder to be heard in a totalitarian state. And I think now it's the time for GCED to find its voice. To be honest, a stumbling block with GCED has always been the kind of generalist approach to global citizenship. Of course, global citizenship education should be general, it's global. And we want young people all over the world to be engaging with these issues. But the problem is that one size doesn't fit all. If you'll bear with my analogy, it's almost like we're making running shoes that everyone can put on. And it's like we're trying to make these running shoes that fit all, where we're trying to get people to squeeze their feet in, or we're trying to pad up the shoes for the feet that are too small, even though we know it's clear that they have no intention of running anywhere, let alone walking. They just want a pair of fancy sneakers. And I recognize this is difficult, especially for UNESCO, which is a member state organization, and there is very real realpolitik. But we need to start making it clearer to governments and institutions that to walk on this road, to wear these shoes, it comes with some responsibility and commitment to human rights. And again, this needs to now include internet connectivity. If we make the stand within GCED, then we can also have a voice. Then we can also call out injustices and discrimination when they're happening in the world, whether these are institutional or between individuals or committed by the very governments that fund GCED work. I think for too long, GCED as a movement and the organizations that drive GCED around the globe, as the teachers in classrooms or the community activists bringing GCED into the non-formal education sector, we've focused on being a kind of a gracious host. We've been nice to everyone. We're inviting everyone in. We're super polite. Now it's the time for us to speak with a bit more determination and maybe with a bit more impatience and a bit more anger. And we need to now, as the late civil rights activist leader said, get into good trouble. That's John Lewis, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. Next, I will invite Lorena.
Thank you very much, Chongmi, and thank you to all the panelists that have spoken before me. I think we already have lots of very real matters that we need to take into account from the perspective of GCED. As for my point, I would first like to start off by saying that indeed this year has been a very puzzling year, to say the least. We have been faced with many different challenges in basically all fronts in which we could face challenges. So the first one, of course, was a health one. Then we moved into an educational one with the need of moving to distance education, environmental challenges, political challenges, social challenges. Basically, every front has been affected in some way. I think despite the difficulties that this means for us, it is also a great opportunity to have a critical analysis of what the priorities need to be for the coming years. I think it has put relevance on what are the failures that we have and what are the points in which we should be focusing on for the coming years. So I will try to focus only on 3 of these challenges that I, from my perspective as a Peruvian citizen and young leader, I would like to highlight. The first one is the role of teachers and teacher education. In Peru, unfortunately, the role of teachers has not been valued traditionally. It is generally, first of all, underpaid work. Second of all, many teachers do not have the appropriate resources to manage their lessons, or they don't receive appropriate teacher training. And unfortunately, this also leads to very little disposition of young people to follow an educational career. I think most of us youth have a real interest in contributing to society through education, and we like teaching, we like sharing, but unfortunately there is not enough motivation from the environment to follow this path because it has not been given the importance that it deserves. However, this year the role of teachers has become fundamental, because as education has become decentralized, basically every teacher is leading their own classroom from their own homes with their limited resources, and they have a huge burden to ensure that education and the right to education is protected for all of their students. Of course, there are some other matters that come to play, such as lack of connectivity for many of the children, especially those living in rural areas or in less privileged areas in an economic matter. But I have seen many stories of teachers coming out of their ways to try to find ways to give education to their students, despite all of these limitations that they may have. So some key competences that I think in relation to GCED need to be developed for teacher training should be digital literacy, empathy, resilience, emotional intelligence. Second of all, I think we should address the issue of community building as a strategy to deal with the current crisis and face the future. In the past months, we have seen that government efforts may not be enough to counter all of the problems that we are facing. And it's not necessarily the government's fault. It's just that we have decades of lack of infrastructure, decades of not prioritizing the key issues that we should face as a society. We have a restless political environment, and basically the crisis is so overwhelming that it's very difficult that only through government policies we could try to address all of the situations that are coming. So we as a community really need to take responsibility for contributing in any way we can. For example, here in Peru and in many other Latin American countries, there is a concept called the community pots, which are common pots that the neighbors contribute to so that they can all together address the issue of hunger. And lately, I have seen many youth-led initiatives that connect people that are able to donate to these community pots so that those who are lucky enough to have a decent and kind of normal life today are able to help those that are struggling the most. Besides that, I think also in the sense of community, we should address the online community that we are building. And we should promote GCED in online platforms through digital literacy. Since we are social distance, this has made us depend heavily on the internet for all of our interactions. And even if this allows us to keep working and keep studying and communicating, it also makes us face a huge challenge of, for example, fake news and some other kinds of discrimination, bullying, violence in social networks. So we must learn that social distancing does not disconnect us from our role as citizens, and we should place more effort into developing a critical appreciation and developing our roles as leaders and as global citizens online. So I hope to develop this further later on, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lorena. Now I'd like to call on Lily to take the microphone.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for the invitation. And really, I think it's just the easy way for me to really somehow follow what my dear colleagues has really mentioned. So perhaps I'm repeating a couple of points on here, but also trying to contribute a little bit more from our point of view from the Bridge 47, which is a global network, brings together the value-based educators and in all levels and in representing different actors. So exactly, I'm trying to take my position from the 2 points of view. The first one is that exactly where are we at the moment? So what exactly the COVID-19 crisis has highlighted, and then what's the role of the global citizenship education on that. Like many colleagues has already mentioned, this is not exactly new phenomenon. We have unfortunately raised, especially with the civil society organizations, civil society citizens, even researchers, has several times mentioned about the existing challenges in the societies. So we all have a lot of experiences about the climate change. We have the difficult access to quality education or health services or unemployment or inequalities. All of this has been on the plate, unfortunately, quite or too long time. And of course, the question for us is that why we haven't really done enough to solve those problems. So like colleagues said, we already have the multi-crises existing on here. And now the COVID has really increased those problems. So it's even get some kind of extra layers over these existing crises. Well, we have a lot of examples about the racism, about the further restrictions on fundamental rights, existential hardships, unemployment, etc. You just name a few on that. So we really have these challenging situation at the moment. But then on the other hand, I think that we are getting more and more aware on that not any one of us alone can really solve the problem. So we are definitely practically in the same boat. And that really means that it's not just for the problem of the governments, it's the problem of all of us. And we need to really find the ways how we can really jointly finding the good solutions on that. And I think it's absolutely important to raise this point now during this week when the United Nations is having its General Assembly, and really listening, for example, yesterday's speeches. There were, I'm not naming or shaming, but there were some of the big countries making their statements yesterday. And the question really is that how much we are really working together, are we really fighting against on that. UN has existed 75 years. I think that we do hope, of course, that that could be as a one platform survive and finding the ways, but it's not just for the point for the member states, it's a point for all of us. I think that one of the points really is that we need to find and use the educational aspects on finding these solutions. And perhaps the third point also to remind is that paradoxically, we really are in this situation where this nationalism and individualism, like I just mentioned, is increasing at the moment, and how we are fighting about the masks or vaccinations all over the world. It's unbelievable about this kind of situation where we are living. But I think we are coming on that point where exactly people are getting more and more aware about need to cooperate. They might not use the word of the global citizenship education, but I think that they are getting more and more aware that this kind of way doesn't really function, and we need to find the ways how we can really together solve the problems more on the constructive and collective way, and really building the solidarity where we already heard good examples, and we'll hear more in afterwards. So the one key point is the critical thinking. And I think that we has the role to play on helping all of us to be critical. Everybody doesn't really have to go to the streets, but you can be critical in everyday life. And you need to find the ways how you can really select and understand that what is untrue and what is the true information. And that's really absolutely important, because based to the knowledge, based to the facts, people are making the decisions. And that's really one point where we need to really put attention on that. We definitely need to let the people know what are the circumstances in all over the world in different places, because that's also as a part of this critical thinking, the understanding that we are in the same boat. We need to find the common solutions. It's not enough that I'm solving my problem in my country or in my community. That could work in some certain point, but that could be used in the other places. So how could we really exactly allocate the information, how we can really build the bridges so that the different actors can work together. I think that the point here is as well that we need to have much more ethical decisions, and not just based on the financial interest or political interest, but it has to be ethical. And it's coming back on the values, what we should definitely promote. And then one thing which I would like to draw attention here is that Jacques Delors made in 1996 the report to UNESCO, opening a little bit about the 4 pillars of learning. And I think that this is absolutely great to remind all of us at the moment about those learning aspects, which are learning to know, so you need to have the knowledge, learning to do, which means actions, activities, learning to be, which is really self-reflection, how I can take my duty being as a part of the society, and learning to live together. And I think that with these components, we all of us, because we are all the time, we are the teachers and the learners. It's not just the positions in the schools, but it's everyday life, every second. We have those both roles. And I think that that keeping on that mind, I think we can really benefit quite a lot on that, and really building and finding the common solutions in the levels wherever we are. And I think the important part as a process of keeping all those learning aspects on mind is that we need to build the trust. If we are not really building the trust, we will never have the sustainable solutions, because then there will be the strong interest conflicts, and then we are just thinking about quite selfish point of view. But this is not really enough. We need to definitely find a ways where we can really work together, where we can accelerate our learning, we can leading the change. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for all for your insight analysis of current situations and suggestions. Actually, the discussion was getting really rich and dense, so that I have this urge, we could just probably go on discussing further. I think on the one hand, I hear kind of common concerns, but with a slightly different approaches. But at the same time, by just hearing you, we are learning so much of very diverse, different situations, specifics of different conditions and priorities as well. I think we can just continue. I just feel like we can continue this conversation, probably for few hours, but I think we have limited time, so probably we will just go to the second round. I will ask more focused questions to each of you. I will just ask you questions into two groups. First, Lester, Dylan, and Lorena. Lester, you shed light to multiple pandemics at this historical juncture. And you touched upon the very, I think, most fundamental and very important aspects that we as educators have to really reflect on. And you suggested a number of interesting and nuanced conceptual lenses, which probably GCED educators may not be familiar with, but I found it very thought-provoking. And Dylan, you argued that global citizenship education needs to focus on social justice with determination, bold statement, which I couldn't agree more. And Lorena, you made a compelling point that global citizenship education must address community building as a strategy to deal with the current crisis and face the future. So my question to all three of you is that, can you just give a further elaboration and some practical implications or examples on those points that I highlighted? I know in 3 minutes you cannot do justice to all these points that truly need in-depth discussions, but would you please try your best? So I think to save time, Lester, you can go first, and then Dylan, and then Lauren. You can just start just right after one another. So Lester, please.
Thank you. So let me pivot to a slightly different perspective. The UNHCR has estimated that in 2019, a total of 79.5 million people have been forcibly displaced globally, including 45.7 million internally displaced persons. Of those that crossed borders, 85% are hosted in developing countries and 73% in countries neighboring their own. 2/3 of the world's refugees are hosted outside of Europe, in Africa, 31%, Asia 20%, the Middle East and North Africa 13%, and the Americas 3%. Now, COVID-19 and its consequences have in many places rendered the already difficult situation in these areas of the world, and for the displaced populations they host, even more precarious, be it due to inadequate hygiene in migrant and refugee facilities, or the dramatic cuts in food rations and other assistance available to them. Widespread restrictions on internal and cross-border movement in the wake of the pandemic have further reduced people's access to protection. In addition, The economic survival of many people on the move, as well as of their hosts, has been imperiled by lockdowns and related measures, which have hit those employed in the informal sector, particularly hard, and have had a disproportionate effect on women and their livelihoods. It is these pandemics that profoundly challenge the very notion of global citizenship education for peace, justice, and sustainability, with a sense of common humanity and global community. If for a moment we imagine ourselves as displaced persons, no longer in our countries of citizenship, perhaps without family, no homes to shelter in, discriminated against by the host country because of the color of our skin or the low economic status in situations of conflict, what would education for global citizenship look like? What citizenship? Whose citizenship? What education? Whose education? So I ask myself, do we have a role to play in this world of multiple pandemics, which people on the move so clearly demonstrate? If we do, what are the linkages between our fellow human beings and where we are today presently located? Is global citizenship even directly relevant to the situation, not to mention sufficient? Are there migrants among us today in this seminar? Do they have direct voice in our pedagogies, our educational practices, in our learning, teaching, and research? I think this illustrates what I was trying to get at conceptually in my previous remarks. So I'll leave it there as a question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Dylan?
Thank you. I think just briefly, one starting is that we, in order to, really be focused on social justice with determination, I think, and you're asking practical implications, I think it does come down to classrooms and really creating resources and lessons and teaching moments that help young people engage with and understand and learn from the current events that are happening around them. Which can then guide them to action against these injustices. And I guess sometimes this will be criticized in member states and funders, and that's where we have to be bold as teachers, organizations, and governments. So one example that I would be looking at, which is a difficult topic, but it's happening in the world around you. Where it kind of comes from the resources from our partner organization called Facing History in Ourselves, and I put the details in the chat room over there. But a great start would be looking at this emergence of what's called taking a knee, and it's a United States example. But what's important about it is that sports has a global reach, and something like basketball is played really across the world, and we've seen sports stars taking a knee. And so the lesson that you can Google on Facing History's site really looks at what does that mean, and how do we use that as an example to get young people to take action. And so I can't obviously take you through the whole lesson and the amount of time that we have, but just to really say, that the students would obviously look at how this movement began in 2016 with Colin Kaepernick, who's the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, and really look at his motivation in taking a knee. And they'd be guided by a quote, which I'll just quickly read. It says, "Kneeling is both an act of defiance and resistance, but also act of reverence, also of mourning and of honoring lives lost." And so the discussion that could take place in the classrooms would be around questions like what is the symbolism of kneeling? Why might people choose to kneel as a form of protest? Can you think of other types of symbolic actions? That space for that discussion is an important starting point, where kids can then take it deeper, looking at bigger questions. And I won't go into methodologies because there isn't time. And I can see our chair already, looking at me glaringly, like to keep quiet. But like, how do we take a knee? How did the knee protest begin? Would be a question we look at. How has the protest changed over time? How else have athletes advocated for social change? What is the history of athletes protesting? These are big questions that allow, again, the space for young people to see that change and action is possible. And then it would end with them, I guess, being asked to symbolically take a knee. And one way to do that is take the United Nations Human Rights Pledge and which reads, I will respect your rights regardless of who you are. I will uphold your rights even when I disagree with you. When anyone's human rights are denied, everyone's rights are undermined. So I will stand up. I will raise my voice. I will take action. I will use my rights to stand up for your rights. The starting point is getting kids to adopt that, but not just to adopt it without thinking, to really work through that language and be able to say, you know, how does the pledge define each individual's role in promoting human rights? So I think being able to bring in the stuff that's happening in the world around in a way that that young people can go deep into these issues, but always ending in a place of, and this is how we can take action about it, I think is a way that we can become a lot more determined around ensuring that social justice is upfronted in GCED.
Yes, thank you. Lorena, I think you can start.
Yes, thank you. As for my point on community building, I wanted to propose that basically as a support, not necessarily as a support, but actually as a necessary requirement for society to develop. As I mentioned, government policies by themselves are not enough, and each person has a responsibility to contribute to their different communities. I think it's important to highlight that we're not talking only about geographical communities, but maybe we could be speaking about our family, our school, our friends, our work, our alternative communities, such as in my case, I really like arts and music, so I have a community there. I have a youth leadership community, and each of these platforms and environments is a chance for us to promote global citizenship education and to promote a more respectful society in which solidarity is a guiding value. Some of the examples I have seen lately, for example, are organizing circles where we can discuss important issues. For example, issues on social-emotional education, which has become fundamental during the pandemic, or coming together with organizers of TED events from around the region to discuss good practices and how we can use the online platforms to continue promoting valuable ideas. I have seen new organizations coming to link different situations of need, for example, the communal pods I was talking about, with people that are able to help. So this already is linking different people in different parts of our country or of our world that should work together in order to support each other and advance further. And another example I would like to bring to this discussion is one that we apply in the leadership program that I have been a part of for around 5 years. Here we follow basically the same steps as in global citizenship education. So we first try to engage students in a cognitive way, then an emotional way, and a behavioral way. So in the fourth module of this leadership program, what we promote is that the students in university from all different kinds of majors, so maybe we may have somebody from a music major with another one from civil engineering and law, work together to create a social entrepreneurship project. And this happens while being guided with international professors and also while discussing with municipality officers to have a more close look to what the problems in our city particularly are. So they, of course, are privileged studying in a private institution, but they have the opportunity to connect with the situations in our city that need some innovative ideas, and they are able to discuss and propose these ideas and then implement them. So through this online program, I believe we are strengthening a sense of community and linking those that have a very lucky situation currently and are able to help those that are struggling a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lester, Dylan, and Lorena. Surely, I think all your points and examples deserve further explanation and more in-depth discussions beyond this webinar. So we hope to continue our dialogue. I will move to the second round. My question to APCEIU, Lily, and Bert. you all work on concrete projects and programs, often involving policymaking and extensive networking. So in your talks also, some of you also broached the gaps between normative imperatives of GCED and its practices and difficulties in putting them into practice on the ground, which now face yet another challenge imposed by this current crisis. So could you please then share with us specific strategies, innovative projects or programs and good practices that might be of inspiration to us? I think probably we can start with APCEIU and then Lily and Bert. So please. Oh, just hold on a second. Your mic. Can you try again?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, I would quickly share examples of some of the projects I'm involved in. Working with AMPES Center for Environment and Development in Nigeria to address the fact that education can no longer be seen as something operating in silos. We need to break the walls. We run an intergenerational conversation series on reimagining education in times of disruption. And this series involved young people, old people, policymakers, practitioners. They come together, as well as marginalized people. And what you find is that at the end of each of these programs, particularly the policymakers, they go out and say, oh, so these are things we have not looked at. So it is important that we continue these conversations and make them as inclusive as possible so that everyone will know that they are stakeholders in education, not only stakeholders, but they are responsible practitioners. I would also give an example of, I'm also involved with the UNU Regional Centers for Expertise. And myself as a regional advisor at the Regional Centers for Expertise in Minna, also in Nigeria, they have succeeded in applying multi-stakeholders and interdisciplinary approaches to use education to create solutions. This includes engaging with policy processes, the government, and that is so critical. They have been able to connect higher education and local communities. And the most important thing about this program is the long-term commitment by the United Nations University in Tokyo. The funding for the program has been sustained since 2003 by the Ministry of Environment, Japan. So we need to know that this task is a long, hard journey. So stakeholders need to commit for the long haul. We must all do the right thing and do it long enough to make a difference, not just for 2 years, 1 year. 1 year. Then another exciting project and inspiring project that I'm involved in is with the Faculty of Education, University of Bristol. There it's called the Transforming Education for Sustainable Futures. And you can Google this. The strategy of TEST network is to co-create, and the word here is co-create new knowledge that can assist education policymakers, practitioners, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders in defining, framing, evaluating, and implementing policies and practices in education that can support socially just, peaceful, and environmentally sustainable development. So this education must support the future we want to go. Their perception is that global citizenship education needs to be understood in a way that takes account of the historical, geographical, political, social, and environmental context. How can education systems themselves be transformed in the context of GCED? How can GCED adopt equitable and a more holistic way of delivering its agenda? Then there is also the EdCharter project that I'm involved in, and it's called the EdCharter Access. It's a very effective, user-friendly, open source tool for evaluating sustainability of educational institutions, organizations, governments, individuals. The tool helps evaluate and improve both the level of your declared commitment So if you say I'm a peaceful person, I'm a responsible citizen, then you can evaluate the fact whether you indeed are or your organization is. Then just to add to what the issues that Lester raised, which are critical on migrants and refugees, I'm also involved with the Commit Network. And what they have done is to develop a toolkit. And the toolkit contains 10-point plan that can help anyone, any organization, to help migrants or refugees in your area to integrate into the society. So there are a lot of things we can do. And there are a lot of things going on out there that we can associate with to deliver the vision of GCED. Thank you.
Thank you. Lily?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think that it's very, very easy to continue from here, because I think that based on the points what colleagues mentioned already, there are so many dimensions and all of those are needed. And I'm the point what I'm bringing now in this discussion is more from Bridge 47 point of view, what we are doing at the moment in the European level. And it comes from the political recognition of the global citizenship education. Because we have learned quite heavily at the moment that exactly there are some kind of drops of the elements of the global citizenship education in different sectors in the societies and especially in the European Union at the moment. And what we definitely will need is more about the overall pan-European larger strategy, which exactly brings together the different aspects of the global citizenship education. So the whole point for us, we had a big event in November in Helsinki together with 200 different stakeholders where we co-created the roadmap. And some kind of overall point is really that there has to be the political recognitions. We will need in one day in Europe some kind of overall strategy. So with this is the strategy, there are several components which we identified, and where the first one is linked to the lifelong learning. So we can't anymore think about that there are X years of the school, what is happening when the person is young, and that's it. It's really throughout the whole world, whole life. It's really the lifelong learning. All of us, we need to really learn a lot during our lives. And it's not just for the formal learning or formal education, it's including the non-formal and informal learning, where again, I'm coming back on my point on that we all are the learners and we all are the teachers as well. So really understanding that from the more holistic point of view. Then another one is that, like we all know, there's quite a lot of tendency at the moment that the education is think through that you will have some kind of skills or competencies which is linked to your work, your job position. And then like we are living in this reality at the moment where we already had quite a big numbers of the unemployment, and now getting more and more, it's not enough that we have the just for the skills for being the good person at work, which is very much important. But the point here is much more about the skills for life, how we can really live in harmony, in justice together with all of us in the societies. And that's much more important than just having the perspective on your skills in specific jobs. Then of course there's always when you're talking about the politics, there's really the big role for the indicators, because of course from the policymaker's point of view, they always want to measure what is the progress, what are the results, how quickly we have really make the impact. And it really do matters that which kind of indicators we are having. So that's one aspect what we identified as a key element to keep in mind. Another important point is of course the resources, because in the societies there should be resources also, and not just for the financial resources, but other resources also for the implementation of the global citizenship education. And that was one aspect which we highlighted as a fundamentally important aspect of this package. And then lastly, about the cross-sectoral cooperation, which again, many colleagues mentioned that as well, that none of us as an individual actor, we can't resolve these problems alone. We can really get nice project or nice activities and we can reach some certain level. But if we really would like to have this transformative change to be happening. We need to challenge about the current system. We need to cooperate. We need to find the common solutions where all of us, by the co-creation or the common thinking, building the trust, and with the trust, we also have the better chances also to make the societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Now, Bert.
Thank you, Jongmin. What are the good practices or strategies that have been implemented to alleviate the impact of the pandemic to education? In relation to my answer to the first question and in relation to global citizenship education, several programs and projects that promote local and national solidarity and partnership have been implemented to ensure the continuity of learning of our students. In the national level, our Department of Education has partnered with the government-owned and private-owned media networks to ensure that radio and video lessons reach the students through local TV and radio channels. It has also partnered with other government agencies, civil society organizations, private and business sector to ensure the effective implementation of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. In terms of capability building and retooling of faculty on flexible learning, our Commission on Higher Education, in collaboration with selected universities and colleges, have launched the program GCED High Ed Bayanihan. In English, it means Spirit of Communal Unity and Cooperation in Education. The program provides free training to faculty members on flexible learning, especially those coming from institutions that are not well prepared to implement the new modality. At the school level, Brigada Escuela or Education Brigade in basic education was launched this year to specifically focus on community support to the different modalities implemented by the respective schools. In our university, PNU, we have launched Project Tanglao or Technology Assistance in the New Normal through Gadgets for Learning and Work, which aims to elicit support from alumni, benefactors, and partners to provide gadgets and connectivity support to indigent students. In terms of curriculum, our current GCED curriculum development and integration project with the Department of Education and APCEIU comes at the right timing while we are rethinking the impact of the pandemic to our education. The project aims to develop a national framework on GCED as basis for curriculum integration. I am certain that the lessons learned from this pandemic will form part of the output of this project. In addition to this, the Philippine Congress recently passed the Good Manner and Right Conduct and Values Education Law. We were able to expand the definition or coverage of values education to include global citizenship. This will surely affect our current work on GCED curriculum development and integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chrissy, Lily, and Bert for your sharing. We will look forward to hearing more of your encouraging activities and learning more about it. We have some questions from the audience. Well, I think probably no. The question itself is just like this. Especially, please advise on how we can address controversial issues such as Black Lives Matter, racism, discrimination, and social injustice in classroom settings. Probably the person just put up the question before Dylan's I think second talk. I think you gave us a little bit of kind of examples of how things are dealt with in the classroom. But if I just elaborate this question a little bit, I think probably in peaceful time, relatively speaking, it is probably less difficult to bring some of the very controversial issues. But when people, especially under this crisis, we see a lot of division, a lot of kind of antagonism, and the condition where we find it difficult to have a really meaningful conversation and dialogue. So, and also depending on political climate, I think you might find space for controversial issues, or it might be difficult for you to bring those issues to the classroom. So we have panelists from different backgrounds. So I think we can hear some of your comments, your experiences on this matter. So anybody wants to respond? Yes, Dylan.
I'll just be brief. I mean, I guess I have a bias to say that we young people are already discussing the contentious issues either at home or in their friend circles and societies. So it is incumbent on us to try and create those spaces. And I think the one key almost safety net that can't be created overnight and should always be a part of what we're trying to do in this work is to really create that environment in the classroom where different voices are heard, where there is respect for each other, where we are giving children the opportunity to reflect, write down their thoughts and feelings, that there's a very clear classroom contract, not rules, but a contract that is really guided by everyone, which creates that environment where we can say we can put in a contentious issue. We may not all agree. It may be an uncomfortable conversation, but we have this environment and specific tools around us in this classroom that allow us to not shy from the conversation. But I think it's important that pre-work is done before we just drop a hard, difficult conversation into a classroom.
Thank you. Anybody wants to add?
Yes, please. Can I?
Yep.
Yeah. Because this is
Betsy.
a very sensitive question, and I think as Dylan has just mentioned, we need to be very sincere about it. I have had a lot of children, come to me and were frustrated because they schooled in a different country, from their color, and they were called black, and we said, but I'm not black. If you ask many children, what's my color? Nobody's going to tell you I'm black. They'll tell you I'm brown, possibly. So the first thing is that but the children will now be taught to lie, so to say, to accept what is not. I've never seen a black human being. I've never seen a white human being. I would run if I see white. But we've now taught, maybe we need to be transgressive and begin to tell the truth to each other. That's where. So when people accept a particular set of people are black, and so everything black goes with it, everything dark, everything bad, then others are white. Oh, they are the good ones. So it's a very sensitive issue. And I think the global citizenship education is a forum where we can, just accept who we are and say the truth and begin to call ourselves as the human beings we are, so that no matter the color, we are able to respect and treat each other the same. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else wants to add? Okay, to share our own experiences at the APCEIU program, and also I think UNESCO topics and learning objectives also I think emphasize this. I think we do all have multiple identities, and so I think probably especially dealing with controversial issues, which actually has much to do with one's identity and positioning. Then I think educators should develop the strategies and pedagogies to bring this issue of multiple identities and how identities are actually not really fixed, and also in relation to one another. So I think that's one point that, to the person who raised this question, I would add this point as well. And then we have several other questions. I think we do have time, right? Just, yes, okay. So kind of fundamental question in this pandemic. I think this is the question from Ronald Gonzalez. So how can we continue to promote global citizenship education core values amid this pandemic? how can we promote it if we remain disconnected and isolated. So this physical distancing, and it limit us from a lot of different kind of interactions that we used to have. So how are we going to deal with the dilemmas, and what are the good ways? What are any suggestions?
Jongmin, can I respond to that? That's a question of my good friend, Dr. Ronald Gonzalez from the Philippines. I think we are only constrained by physical limitations, but technology has given us the opportunity to continue the dialogues that we used to do, to continue the kind of conversation that we used to do in the past. So I think some of the best practices that we did already is to gather practitioners and advocates on GCED to continue talking about issues of discrimination, issues of social injustice in our local or in our own societies. And it does not limit us, especially now during the pandemic. I think we just have to continue to find innovative ways using technology in order to push through our advocacy. Thank you.
Lolena?
Yes, thank you. If I may add, I completely agree with what Bert has just said, that yes, we are physically distanced, but we have many other resources available from the internet. But also, for example, I would like to highlight an effort made by the Peruvian government. With all the failures and difficulties we have in education, one of the programs that they have advanced on is in providing education through radio and also through computers and television to try to make it more accessible. And they have also done this in different local languages. So one of the problems we usually have is that most of the information and education is in Spanish, but at least online, they provide this education resources also in Aymara and Quechua, which are two different local languages. And besides that, I would also like to highlight that in these times of pandemic and social distancing, at least in my community of young people, I have had more interaction than ever with young leaders from different countries. So conversations with youth from Indian organizations, or conversations with youth that are interested in education topics from all around the world. It really has given us an opportunity to connect, because of course we cannot move from outside our houses. So this in a sense makes it easier for us to just sit in front of a computer and discuss and share ideas. So yes, we are faced with different challenges and lack of accessibility and many times lack of connection. But I think it's also an opportunity. If you are a teacher, you may invite another teacher from another country to be part of your classroom and start sharing with your student. If you are a young leader and you're interested in arts and culture and sports and any other topic, it's a great opportunity to connect with organizations in different parts of the world that maybe usually because of time constraints wouldn't be able to hold a conversation with you, but now it's more likely that they will.
Okay, Lester, yeah, you want to add? Yes.
Yeah, I think the situation in which we find ourselves provides an opportunity to rediscover in a meaningful way how to find the global in the local. It's probably also the most difficult thing to do. So I have my neighbors, and I communicate. I'm in this webinar. I communicate with people all over the world, but I don't talk to my neighbors right now. When in fact, perhaps that's where we need to slow down in terms of the global technological divide, and trying to discover ways of building and rebuilding communities committed to education, global education, but operating at the local level.
Lily, you want to add? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I'm so inspired about the colleagues' answers. I think that it's really, really good to continue from here. I really like the Lester's point about this global and the local. And listening about the other comments, it really came to my mind that exactly there are the huge needs in the human beings at the moment. We have the social connections, lack of social connections. And I think that is somehow the motivator exactly we should use about these situations where we are living, and there are a lot of different kind of channels how to do that. But I think that what really matters, and that's really linked back to that question about the racism and all of that, is really what is the language what we use, because that really matters, that how we are talking about us or the others or something. I think that we really need to put attention that what is my vocabulary, what I'm using, how I'm talking about those or us or something like that. And I think that that's really, we have to put a lot of attention and be really careful on that, because many of us, we are also very active in the social media. And I'm thinking about, especially about the political discussions in the social media. It's really looking for the fight. It's really the attitude is that I want to really provocate about the other ones. And I think that we need to take the role as a peace builders, or somehow putting the positive sides on there, and trying to mediate a little bit on these discussions, and trying to take the responsibilities, and not just allowing that kind of racism or other things is happening. I think we can do that in these circumstances. Still, there's a lot of opportunities, but it also asks a little bit creativity, and we need to be brave. It's not always very easy. You can really find yourself in a very difficult places, but I think that we don't really have a forward on all that. If we should be those leaders, which Ilan very rightly exactly encourage all of us to take the positions wherever we are, either in the local or global or wherever levels. But I think that it's really the case that we should really look to the mirror and start with ourselves. Thanks.
Thanks. Sometimes, we are connected through, on the, online, or, through internet, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are socially or emotionally connected. So I think that's a kind of a area that we need further explanation as well. So let me just move to the final round. So dear panelists, you have 2 minutes each for your final comments. So whatever you want to, you would like to add. Although in your final comments, may I ask you to include your kind of 1 minute insight into how we can keep our vision and commitment high against these current difficulties, a kind of a secret recipe of yours, if you have any. So I'll just give you the chance to make final comments. So I'm looking at this gallery, and up there I see Bert. So we can start from Bert and then move on to Lester. Yeah.
Thank you, Jongmin. In education, the pandemic has provided us very significant lessons in terms of our past and current practices and the future of education under the new or next normal and beyond. There are important innovations that must be done in terms of curriculum and pedagogy and the use of technology in teaching and learning. In curriculum, for instance, we look at new competencies that have emerged due to the pandemic or the need to strengthen existing competencies and provide them ample space in our curriculum so that our learners can develop them in the future, such as urban sustainable lifestyle, environmental sustainability, managing crisis situations, resiliency education, psychological well-being or wellness, information communication technology, health education, among others. Equally important, the pandemic teaches us the very important lesson of our being interrelated and interdependent despite the economic and social challenges brought about by COVID-19. We have learned that by working together under the spirit of empathy and compassion, we provide hope to our learners, the future of our nations and the world. As advocates of GCED, we have to continue despite the odds, keep the connections with fellow advocates, and be open to innovations. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you. So Lester, please.
Well, I don't have a closing statement except to say that what I want to leave with you, in addition to my deep gratitude for this opportunity to have a global conversation, are kind of like three aphorisms, two of which have been mentioned here. One is that we are in this together. The other is we are in the same ocean, but in different boats. And the third, my long history is, let me quote my Latin here, medici cura te ipsum, physician, heal thyself. Thank you.
Right then, yes, Lorena, yes.
Thank you. Well, as a final remark, I would just like to stress the fact that GCED is a responsibility for everyone, regardless of their occupation, regardless of their age. I was lucky enough that even before I came to know of GCED's existence, so maybe around 12 years ago, in my first approach to youth leadership, they stressed the fact that leadership is something that we must carry with us in our day-to-day life. So it happens in our family, it happens with our friends, with our close community, and of course in international levels eventually, but we are all responsible to start having meaningful conversations today with the people we are connected to in order to promote the values of understanding and solidarity and cooperation. So it doesn't matter if it's not only the role of teachers and educators. We are all educators in some way, and we can start from maybe youth organizations in our universities. We can start creating clubs to encourage discussion. We can start connecting the dots between the places where we see there is someone in need with the people that we see can help those persons. And in short, I think we can all be critical about the position in which we are, the problems that surround us, and what kind of contribution we can have. So once each of us accepts that responsibility and starts taking action, it will be much better path for all of us to follow in order to achieve a sustainable and peaceful society. Thank you.
Thank you. So Lily, are you going to take the microphone? Lily, yes?
Yes, thank you. Perhaps I could conclude somehow on my points and invite you to exactly close your eyes and imagine a bicycle in your eyes, because I think the bicycle somehow exactly created the points which I think that we should keep on our minds all the time when we are doing wherever we do the global citizenship education. Because for the bicycle, if you're thinking about the body of the bicycle, so somehow it's the foundation of the whole bicycle. It's based on the values, it's somehow the identity, it might be even the worldview. And then you're sitting in the saddle, which really is the motivation, that you are motivated to exactly move on and really finding the ways how you can really do the better global situation, a global citizenship education. Then the wheels, which definitely we need both of those are representing me for the knowledge and the sources of the information. So I'm based to those, the work, what I'm doing. And with the pedals, I'm doing actions. So definitely this is moving on and then we are doing something concrete. Sometimes you need the brakes, which could be also the barriers. And I think it's very important to understand your barriers, which blocks you, so that you can really turn around those or finding the ways how to move on. And then perhaps finally about the handlebar, where you guide your bike, where you go, it really gives you the orientation of the future, and you can really orient where you go. You can really give the way where you would like to go on. But exactly this is, at least in my thinking, somehow using this metaphor reminds me that there are several aspects that what you need to keep at the same time on your way to the better world. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting metaphor. Yes. Dylan?
Thank you. I think the pandemic, well, I think what we know is that this kind of pandemic, these kinds of crises that we are facing, these movements that we are a part of, they are not, they will happen again. But what has been shown is that we haven't been well prepared in so many ways for these, even though we have been predicting and knowing these things will be there. And so again, I think there is that space where we need to have honest looks at ourselves, as Lester said, and GCED as a concept and what we're trying to do. And maybe it means restructuring, maybe it means re-navigating our focus, so that we are better prepared for what we know will come. And I think it's not all doom and gloom. I think we have lessons from history, from all our histories, from our own personal histories, but also from our country's histories. We have lessons of people who've taken a stand. We have lessons of working against the odds and achieving something. And we have lessons on what happens when you don't take a stand. And I guess I didn't do justice to John Lewis, the great civil rights leader. And I guess my parting comment is just repeat his quote. And I think if the world was full of more John Lewises, I think we'd do better. And in fact, if GCED had this as the byline, I think we could shift the world. Let's get into good trouble.
Thank you. Now, APCEIU, yes. I think your microphone is off again.
Yes, I'm sorry for that. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to Jilmin for the very inspiring way that you have moderated the session. And I'd like to thank the panelists for all the take-homes that I've already received from their closing remarks. My remarks would be that leadership must first lead themselves in good citizenship before leading others. We cannot train our children for peace and prepare for war. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, he said, our future rests on solidarity. We must repair broken trust. We must reinvigorate our multilateral project, and we must uphold dignity for one and for all. So I'm saying this to all our viewers from the different social handles, that please, let's join hands. Let's make the giant leap to the future we want without trampling on people, without trampling on the planet. A world where everyone, anyone can breathe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for your insightful discussions. We truly appreciate your contribution today. We will look forward to our next opportunity to hear more from you. Thank you. Thank you all. This is the end of the panel discussion, and together, now we would like to wrap up our today's webinar. We thank all the speakers for their invaluable contribution today. We also thank the audience. We hope all of you found your own key takeaways from our webinar today. Today's webinar is just the beginning of our dialogue and sharing. It must have generated more questions than answers. Actually, it in my mind, I have so many questions from your talks. I think we have more tasks now to tackle. So we cannot really arrive at any definite answers right away, but we do believe that in this frustrating time of crisis, so-called physical distancing, it is critically important for us to stay connected socially, emotionally, and intellectually, so that we can continue our dialogue, share ideas and practices, and encourage and support one another. Let's not not stop, our conversation here, and not only conversation, our collaboration, our actions, and we hope we continue our endeavors together. And I will take this opportunity to invite you to our 5th International Conference on GCED, scheduled for the 3rd through the 5th of November, which will be held online this year, just like today's webinar. Please take note that registration is not yet open. So we will send out the announcement for the registration in mid-October, about 3 weeks from today. So I know that you all have burning desire and commitment to participate, but please be patient with us. Thank you. I hope you will come back to our upcoming virtual conference in November. We will see you soon. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.